All right, welcome everybody this afternoon to our ordinary meeting on the 27th of July 2022. May I first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet on today, and I humbly pay my respects to the people of the Wiradjuri and Ngunnawal nations, their past, future and emerging elders. For housekeeping, if you are asked to evacuate, the emergency procedure is to exit via the door leading out of the building directly outside the council chambers and proceed to the footpath opposite the council chambers and await further instructions. This council meeting is being streamed live, recorded and published in accordance with council's live streaming in council meetings policy. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the council, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The Chair and or the General Manager have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and or unacceptable behaviour and or comments. Today we have no one in the public forum, but we have today two applications for councillors to attend this meeting by Zoom, by digital means, and Councillor Ingram and Councillor Flannery. Do I have a mover?
Councillor Fitzgerald.
And seconder. All right, and those in favour? Thank you, everybody.
And you might want to also put the late report at this point. So we'll not do this, we'll do that in thing, but accept the late report.
We also have a late report, which we need to accept.
We need to accept the late report, and it will be heard in 11.11.22.16 after 22.15.
Okay.
But we just need to accept the report.
Okay. All right. So we need to move that?
Well, yes, we need to move it.
All right. So do I have someone who will move the acceptance? Thank you, Councillor Piper, and seconded
Dodd.
Councillor Dodd. Those in favour? Thank you. All right. Moving on. We don't have apologies or applications for leave, so the next is sympathy expression. So I would ask everybody to be upstanding for the following of our community: William Yeomans, John Hall, Sue B, Trevor Rooks, Faye Hancock, Russell Collins, John Piper, Baby Valley Langford, James Gibson, William Apps, Margaret Butt, Joan Apps, Leila Baker, Kobe Frampton, Jill Nash, Diane and Graham Daw, Aubrey Sykes, Michael Thomas, Glenn Murphy, Patrick Shea, Dennis Dwyer and John Gilbert. Thank you, councillors. All right, next, confirmation of minutes for the Hilltops ordinary meeting.
Just through you, Madam Mayor, it was pointed out by Councillor Armstrong that at the meeting of the 22nd of June, we accepted an apology from Councillor Stadmiller. We didn't grant a leave of absence, so that's why that the resolution for this minute is accepting the apology, which was so resolved, and the minutes would be changed accordingly. So it's a procedural issue, just for the notation of councillors. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have someone who will put forward this? Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald, second. Councillor Houston. Thank you. Those in favour? Thank you. And the next one, I think, is for the extraordinary.
Extraordinary meeting. Page 30, councillors.
All right. Extraordinary meeting on page 30. Here we are. Do I have somebody who is happy to put forward a motion that we accept this? Thank you, Councillor Mackie, and seconded Councillor Foreman. All of those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Righto. Next we go on to
Disclosures of interest, page 33.
on page 33. Any disclosures of interest? I have nil here. Are there any late ones? Yes.
So, Councillor Armstrong makes a declaration, stay in the chamber, participate in the debate, but leave the chamber for a vote for the reasons under item number 11.6-2210, subject DA 2022/0054. Reason for interest: close relative owns adjoining lands. And we have the appropriately signed document from the councillor here.
Okay. Thank you. The next one. I don't have a mayoral minute today, and the next one, 9 mayoral report, which is in front of you. And it includes a couple of reports from activities that I have been involved in, and they're there for people to peruse. All right. I will move it. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Alison Foreman. Those in favour?
Yep.
Thank you.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on now to councillor meetings attended. Those in front. Councillor Armstrong, your name's first on the list. Have you anything to add?
As per the report.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Dodd?
As per the report, am I allowed to comment?
Yes.
Yes. So it was very worthwhile attending the ALGWA 2022 conference, and that's why that recommendation is there, that councillors and staff be encouraged to attend next year's, because next year's will be at Forbes, so it's very close and easy for us to get to. It was, I think the culture of councils and governments have changed in recent years, and this particular conference recognised difficulties and barriers to women's participation in particular. There were some men there, it wasn't just women. And it gave all the participants the skills and knowledge to be confident and successful in the local government sphere. It was also a useful way to meet other people in similar positions, council staff as well as councillors, and to gain knowledge and contacts that would benefit both council and myself. And that is why that recommendation is there, because I think it would benefit other, particularly women, to attend the conference next year. the other thing is that there is a adaptation in action. There are climate change webinars put on by Local Government New South Wales. There's 2 more to go. And I would highly recommend registering for those, particularly the 4th one, which is talking about energy revolving funds, funding net zero emission actions in your council. And it's particularly relevant to small or regional, rural and regional councils. So it's particularly relevant for us, and I would recommend going onto the Local Government New South Wales site and registering for those final 2 conferences. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. Councillor Fitzgerald, could you just wait for a moment? I might ask if Councillor Mackie would like to make a few comments, because you were also at the conference.
I was going to talk about later, but I will support Mary's comments. I mean, besides having a very nice time, which we did, I met a lot of women who, like me, were new to council, and also women who had a great deal of experience. Besides that, I met a lot of female staff, so that was very interesting just to see, you know, the back end of what we do, and so it was very interesting. A lot of the talk was really about the confidence that we need to actually speak our mind, or so, which I find I need to do a lot of research before I can come out and actually have a good positive approach to what I want to say. So it was really nice to hear that other people, even, you know, after a lot of years, still need to have a good look at what they're going to say and even rehearse. And so I just found it was really beneficial. That's probably all. Oh, can I just do the report while I'm here? Because mine's not in here, and I did send it in late, so it is actually on record somewhere. But
yes, and if you'd like to go, yes, your report.
Okay, so just minutes as meetings as minuted, as well as a meeting with a Boorowa constituent on the 4th of July, Boorowa Business Chamber, and then the same week on the 6th there was a resilience meeting in Boorowa. Then the AGWA 7th, 8th and 9th of July, the conference, and then the briefing. And then I had the pleasure of going to the Boorowa Rotary changeover lunch on the weekend. And here I am tonight.
Thank you. Next on the list now, we will go back to Councillor Fitzgerald.
Before I go through a report, is there any, may I ask a question of Councillors Dodd and Mackie, in terms of some of the paperwork seems interesting from your reports, and I was just wondering, is it available in any form? For example, I was looking at Amanda Rose's do's and don'ts in her confidence toolkit. Seems interesting.
I was going to say, if I suggest to look at anyone, I wouldn't suggest looking at Amanda's, because everyone else was much better.
Thank you very much.
I mean, she presented beautifully, but, you know, if you want to drill down to the detail, I'd look somewhere else. Dr. Pittman, in particular, was incredibly impressive.
Okay.
There is a couple of links there. I would be happy to share my notes, but we didn't have anything. We didn't receive anything written, so it's only notes that we took.
Yes, you might have noticed we are trying to build up a library, a reference library within the councillor office, and certainly anything that you think is of interest to all councillors that you would like to put there, feel free to. Thank you.
Returning to my report, it's as in the business papers.
Thank you. And Councillor Foreman.
I would just like to add, on the 22nd of July, I had a constituent meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hewson? As ministered. And Councillor Piper?
Might have to get councillors to turn their mic on.
Councillor Piper. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ingram.
Sorry about that, mate. We have to advertise 2 private positions for people to stand and give it, I'm presuming, the normal 28 days. And then if we get more than 2, then we, as a council, have to determine who's going to get it. And as I said, they're very, very close to handing out money.
That's correct, and you'll notice that there is a paper at 11.9.22.13. Oh, sorry, 22. No, 11.7.22. No, I've missed it again. Look at it. I'll take my glasses off so I can read. 11.8.22.12 CWP Renewables Bango Wind Farm VPA Section 355 Committee, and that is addressed in that resolution for that said purpose. Thank you.
May put my mic on now. Councillor Stedmiller.
Meetings is now.
Thank you. And to Zoom, Councillor Ingram.
Meetings is minute.
Thank you, sir. And Councillor Flannery.
Thank you. The 2 constituent meetings, just councillor briefing on the 13th and meetings as minimum.
Thank you. All right, we move on to the next one.
Are we going to move that? Be accepted? There was a recommendation. So.
Yes, Alison Foreman has moved.
So we either move it and second it or vote on it?
Those in favour?
Yeah, look,
Thank you.
Mr. General Manager, can I just ask, I know it's unfortunate and I hate being on Zoom at this end, but if people don't put their microphone on, I haven't got a clue what's being said. I don't want to get in the situation of voting on something that have to go through it again because I couldn't hear it the first time.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Just a reminder to all councillors to put their microphone on, and should we get to questions from staff, I will ask them to turn that microphone on when they get there for the very purpose. Thank you, councillors and staff.
Okay, thank you. The next one, if we move on to the community recognition scheme, do any councillors have people that they would like to recognise?
I actually do.
Yes, Councillor Foreman.
I would just like to nominate, can you hear me, Brian? Okay, yep. I would just like to nominate Robert Donges from IGA Young for this month's community recognition scheme. Mr. Donges was recently recognised for his outstanding achievements and contributions to the Australian independent retail grocery industry by being inducted into the IGA Hall of Fame. He started at IGA here in Young in 1972 and went on to purchase IGA in Young in 1987. Robert and his team have been supporting the town for 60 years now, which is an extraordinary achievement. He is a key member of the community. Not only is he one of our major employers, he is a major supporter of many local charities, clubs, fundraisers and anyone in need. I feel that Mr. Donges should be recognised for his generosity, achievements and his dedication to our community.
Thank you, Councillor Foreman, and I'm sure everybody applauds Robert for what he has done for our community and the willingness with which he contributes to our society. I'd like to have 2. These are 2 young people in our community. The first one is Emily Pratt, who was the Vet in School Student of the Year Award for the Riverina. And this is a prestigious award for a young woman coming from our Hilltops to receive, and I think she is to be congratulated, as is William Kemp, who was the recipient of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Student of the Year Award for his Certificate 3 in Carpentry, working through TAFE. So congratulations to both these young people within our Hilltops. Thank you. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Dodd, and a seconder, Councillor Hewson. Those in favour? Thank you. Okay, next we move on to the General Manager's report and 11.1, 2205, the cash and investment report for the 30th of June 2022. And the CFO, we have a mover and a seconder, Mary Dodd.
Could I ask a question, please? Yeah. Under financial implications on page 44, it lists income budget at 156,000 to date, 106. What's the timing to date and how many months? Oh, it's not. No, you won't.
Hear me now? Yep. Sorry, Councillor, can you hear me? No.
Yes, okay. The question is, Council's interest income budget is $156,000. Earned to date is $106,000. Represents 68% of the budgeted income over what time period? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
To the end of May.
So how many months would that out of the 12 months?
Oh, sorry. So what page are you on? 40,
Page 44.
44.
Bottom line.
Yes, that's right. Yep. So the income budget's for the year. Yep.
Financial year.
Financial
to
year,
May.
30 June, and
Yep.
yeah, and the receipt to the 31st of May.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Just in regard to, have there been any changes in the Minister's investment order of late?
Sorry, I missed that.
Have there been any changes in the Minister's investment order of late?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Receive that by circular if we actually get that advice. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. The next one. Thank you. Here we go. Yep. 11.2, outstanding rates and charges and sundry debtors report. Do I have a mover? Armstrong and a second, Councillor Hewson. Questions? Comments? All those in favour? Oh,
So
Councillor
I just have a question about the overdue 4 months to 1 year. That is very high, and I know that you have been doing some things around getting in those overdue rates, but it's nowhere near comparable.
Sorry,
so the total rates and other charges, debtors ageing analysis.
Yes, yes.
And $1 million 4 months to less than a year. Well, the other years are around, the other time months are about 30,000. It's a huge.
Yeah, so you'll notice that in fact we've reduced the total outstanding in the last month to the month of May. So at the moment there has been a second issuing of default notices have gone out through outstanding collections. So I'm sure you're bound to get some feedback on that. There's also been some statement of claims issued in court for those, and it's unfortunate that this relates to a lot of people who have not responded, not provided any feedback. Some of those then actually made a couple $100 in payments, and you're probably aware that there'll be 25 more properties going to sale of land in September. So there is a fair bit of activity instructing our debt collectors at the moment. So I'm sure you'd probably like to get some feedback over. We're trying to bring that figure right down even further, of course.
Thank you.
Before you go, CFO. After the next one, do you see how many more movements will there be in maybe selling?
In relation to sale of land?
Yes.
I'd have to take that on notice, but I could certainly give that information. Some of those that I did see with the default notices that went out and statement of claim made a payment like of a couple $100. So straight away they're outside or inside the 5-year limit, if that makes sense. But I can actually take that on notice and provide them to the next meeting. How many other properties may fall within that range?
Just through you, Madam Mayor, this is an observation. It would appear as though the amount of outstanding rates for the year is going to come back to about 7%. Is that correct?
In terms of the balance shown on page 47, Councillor Armstrong, is that what you're referring to?
In terms of 46, bottom of 46.
Bottom of 46. Yes. Yeah. We're striving to get that right down.
That's. I'll just congratulate staff on that, because that's a 4% improvement on last year. And considerable improvement on previous years as well. So debt recovery is always a difficult process, not very pleasant. And I commend the CFO and his staff for the dogged pursuit.
We've got a lot of work still to do there.
I can understand that.
But yeah, thanks for that comment.
You start to eat an elephant one mouthful at a time.
Not always popular.
Just another question. How are we going about the recoveries? Which is the most successful way so far?
At the moment, we're continuing to use outstanding collections. So we send reminder notices out. And then once they get to a point, and usually they'll come to me now, when they get to a point where they're a couple of months old, and I'm trying to stringently get them followed up. So outstanding collections, or some of them might be too small, we might make the call and say, we'll just continue to send a reminder notice. Otherwise, we've now sent another lot of default notices out, basically no correspondence. And so I then go through the list. If I've got any problems, I'll see the general manager with a comment. Or if we have, it could be a combination of rates, it could be a combination of debtors as well. We've got some debtors who are defaulting at the moment as well that we have to, and I'm sure some of your council will get some feedback on that. But generally I go through the list and then give the order to go to outstanding collections and say, in fact, that's what I've just done the last couple of months, send default notice, and we've unfortunately had to then, about 50, I think, of now, we're actually listening in court because they've just failed to look. We know that there could be people that are too embarrassed. That's certainly a comment made, but we at least expect that they'd make a phone call or make some other communication and tell us why they're not paid.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Okay, no more questions. Put to vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. Carried. Next one, 11/3/2207, development application stats for June 2022. The recommendation is there. We receive and note the development applications and complying development certificate monthly stats as at 30th of June 2022. Do I have a mover? Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Any comments? Questions? If not, I'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Page 54, 11/4/2208, and this is the DA 2022 0137, dual occupancy and subdivision, 2 lots at 47 Long Street, BOOROWA. The recommendation is before you. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Mackie. And a seconder?
Councillor Stedmiller.
Councillor Stedmiller. Do I have any questions? Comments? If not, put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Because it's a DA, I will read the councillors For Councillor Foreman, Fitzgerald, Mackey, Rolls, Stadmiller, Hewson, Armstrong, Piper, Dodd, Flannery and Ingram. Motion's passed. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Just an observation for any of our council workers. It seems to be an awful lot of work there just to have a dual occupancy okayed.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the reason all the reports come through without identifying which particular part of the legislation is required, they come to you because we must bring it before you, whether it's number of submissions, whether it's the type of DA, etc. So we don't unnecessarily bring these documents to you, as it's the regulations that we must be beholden to. Thank you, Councillor Piper. Page 180, councillors.
Anyone got a mic on?
I have. Thank you. I do now. Is that better, Councillor Ingram? I will read it again. 11.5, 2209, DA 2022 0023, dwelling house at Jerrybang Lane, Monteagle. The recommendation is before you. Do I have a mover? Councillor Foreman and a seconder? Councillor Dodd. Does anybody want to speak to this? Any comments? Questions?
Yeah, could I have a question? Oh, just a question. Although I've looked through it, I might have missed it, but it seems to have it's a landlocked site and no access to roads. How does somebody in a dwelling get access to road? Is there going to be an easement, or how's that work through?
And microphone, thanks, David.
Hello. Good afternoon. So in the conditions, I'll just find the right page here so I can refer you to it. There we go. So you've got the site plan approved there. Then you've got, I'm trying to find the exact condition number just to refer you straight to it. But there is a requirement for access to all sites, of course, as part of any subdivision approval. Here we go. So bottom of page 198 is condition 29. Property access to Jerrybang Lane should be upgraded as a rural property access type treatment, generally in accordance with the Austroads Guide to Road Design. So that's where the access will occur, and that's a standard of access required.
That goes across other people's property, or is it their property? What's the issue?
The other thing I'll show you quickly, if I can find the layout plan here. As you were saying, Council, these reports are pretty long. So trying to find this thing. Go forward. Oh, here we go. I tagged the report and I didn't tag the site plan. Let's do it, Anthony. Put my glasses on. There we go. Okay, so which side are you concerned about? The one at the back there, which has the road, the creek across it, and therefore it appears it doesn't have access?
But in the comments, it says it's landlocked, and I was just wondering how that issue is dealt with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. This one, without going into too much detail, because it's actually a listed creek and everything too, there had to be some conversations with Crown Lands, etc., to confirm the actual type of easement or access required. And that's actually meant another assessment of that part of the process and taken a bit longer to get approval as a result. But at the end, it's all been resolved and they can get access across that creek. Yep.
Thank you, Director. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Is that access physical access or legal access?
That's what I was trying to find the site plan just to confirm.
I do know there's a rather significant difference between the two.
Yes, there is. And that's why I was trying to find the site plan here and the reference. I'll go back to the report because there was a section in the report on it.
I missed David's response as to whether the access would be across the creek.
Would appear we're getting nothing near Councillor Flannery.
No.
Councillors, David is just looking for the exact section to which to refer you to. So he's just looking through the 70-odd pages. So it's reference point clause 29 at the bottom of page 198, Councillor Flannery, under access, and that 29, where it talks about the largest vehicle likely to access the site.
Is it across the creek or what? Where is the point of access? It talks about the requirement for a road and generally a standard, but it doesn't say where the access will be.
So that's the map, Councillor Flannery. It's the page 233, the map. It's the map from 1873. At the bottom of that, I'll call it, for the absence of, for clarity, the pink area, there is a sliver road at the bottom there, which is the access point at which David is referred to.
On page 233.
32, Councillor, I'm sorry, 232.
So they have to cross the creek.
Actually have an existing road reserve that goes across the creek, separate of the block. They don't have to go across the creek in their block. So if you look at that map on that page, you'll notice there's a sliver of a road on the southern part of the map along the sites, and it kinks and gives access to both sites.
But just to clarify, is there a creek crossing required?
It's not required, but the creek does cross the property.
Right. Is it a running creek?
Depends when you ask me. I'd have to get back to you on that one, to be honest.
Because wouldn't there be standards for creek crossings?
Yes, and there is. And that's why I said that we did go back to Crown Lands and confirm a few issues in regard to how we consider this creek. But as they've got road access already on the edge of the site as well, It's generally a moot point in regard to access.
Okay. Just the laws have changed in relation to what you can do in creeks anymore. You can't actually put creek crossings in creeks anymore that inhibit flow.
Yep, noted. And like I said, there is a separate access on an existing road reserve.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Director. If there are no further questions, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
For brevity, all councillor hands are shown, so it's at red. All councillors have voted for the DA. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, now we'll move on to 11.6, 2210, DA 2022 stroke 0054, the vehicle sales premises at 4657 Olympic Highway, Young.
Move that way, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded, Councillor Fitzgerald. Questions or comments?
I'd like to
Councillor
speak
Ingram?
to it.
Yes, you certainly may.
Councillors, I'd like to speak against this DA application to start with. On a really easy level, it reads that it's a DA to sell a few dirty cars on a patch of grass on the gateway to Young. And if you wonder where that comment comes about dirty, if you went to page 272, you'll see that one of the conditions is they're not allowed to wash cars on that site, but I'll come back to that. But the report itself I find conflicting. From the very second paragraph, they want a variation from off-street parking for the Young Development Control Plan. You need to understand that the thoughts of every other business in our community that has been made adhere to these control plans and abide by them. And here we are, someone seeking a variation, and read later on, and staff seem to think that it's adequate because it's meets a performance objective. I've got a different opinion of the performance objective than those people looking at this matter. The second paragraph states that the Transport for New South Wales raised no objections to the development, and if you take that as a stretch, that's okay, but if you happen to turn to page 257 and 258, you'll find that they came with some strong recommendations to go with this application. Again, staff have seen fit to agree with the applicant and say, oh, that's not necessary or too costly. I don't know if how we do business has changed that much, but in previous days, that really didn't wash because the applicant didn't want to spend the necessary money to make his application feasible, or in this case, a matter of safety. The overriding factor, my concerns in regard to this, there's two. First and foremost, of course, is safety. Second, and right behind it, this is proposed to be put on the gateway to our community. With a bit of gravel spilt on the road, council staff have seen fit not to go with the necessary upgrades against the recommendations from Traffic New South Wales. But then later on in the report, they keep justifying their replies by saying that the Road Authority have not objected to the proposal or identified road safety issues. But clearly they did, because they recommended that work be done on the intersection and the upgrading of the road. So I do find that a bit conflicting. There's some other matters in the report. They talk about movements of vehicles being 9 for a normal household. Then there's a number 12.6 may increase to an extra 3.6 movements a day. It doesn't sound like the business is going to be very viable if that's all the attention of the traffic. But then later on in the report, it mentions that it could be 15 movements. So I have some real concerns about how this has came to council with a recommendation to accept the DA as it's put forward. I don't know if councillors have been out and just had a bit of a look at the area, but already it seems to be part of car sales area already being vehicles out the front, and it looks like, and I could be wrong and could be corrected, but there looks to be a couple of dead vehicles there already. Council, we're being asked to take on and accept a DA that is probably the lightest that I've seen ever put to council and been recommended by staff to accept, because apparently the applicant states in his documents categorically that they won't do this and they won't do that. Besides the safety issue, the aesthetics of the entrance to our community, our town in Young, the reliance on compliance by council staff with the way this report is written would be enormous. I just can't understand how we can make so many organisations and businesses comply with the regulations, and here we are with this one, and staff are recommending that we accept it. I'm open to hear what their thoughts are on that and see if I can come around to see why we should accept this. But at the moment, I'm struggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Councillor, you're not quite a councillor, are you? Director Rowland, would you like to make any comments?
Not quite a director either. Anyway. Okay, so I'll go through a few of those points in order. Let me know if I miss anything, please, Councillor Ingram. First one in regard to safety and road safety in particular, and the comments from Transport for New South Wales. This is on, isn't it? You can hear me, I hope. Yep, good. Okay, so Transport for New South Wales aren't officially actually required to give advice on this, but we sent it to them for advice because we thought as it's fronting the road, even though there's no direct access up Olympic Way, we thought it was worth them being aware of the situation. And they came back to us with advice, and in that advice they said, oh, we recommend you look at these things. So there were recommendations and advice, not as requirements. Despite that, we still use those. There's one variation or thing that comes out as a variation in the report, and that is about where there's a reference to an upgrade of the intersection. Upon discussions with the department, it was found what they meant by an upgrade wasn't actually physical upgrade of the site, it's just making sure it was to a standard that was complied with by council. It already complies with that standard. So therefore there was no other works to be done. The only other part of it that related to that was the extension of tarmac down the road. I think it's only down 6 metres, I think it is on the report. So extend it down to about 14 or so that I think they said they wanted up to 20. The condition we went for was pretty much, I don't remember the exact distance now, very similar to what Transport were after. But in regard to all the other elements they raised and referenced in the report and in the correspondence from the department back in May, they are all covered in the conditions of approval. In regards to movement of vehicles, there's a standard set up by the former RMS, which is, as you know, now Transport for New South Wales, and in that they set the parameters for actual levels of trip generation by development and scale of development. That's what the officers have used to work out those numbers. They're not numbers that are pulled out based on local information or anything else, actually straight from the state government. That's why they've been used. Yes, they do feel a bit low and we're a bit uncomfortable too, but they're the numbers we're meant to use. And that comes back once again to the scale of development, which is another issue you raise. The problem is we only get to assess what's put in front of us in the application. When you look at it, you get concerned that there may be more development occurring on that site than what's been applied for, but we cannot take that into consideration. We can only take into consideration what they applied for. What that means is, like you said, our conditions have to be pretty tight to ensure if they go above those thresholds, other things come into play. Many of the issues you talk about for including the upgrading of the intersection, if they do increase the scale of development, yes, we do need to look at that again. But at this stage, based on what's been applied for, that's the most we can do. In regard to amenity, sorry.
I just want to respond, if I can, just quickly to a couple of those comments in regard to the last bit about would need to be upgraded if the scale increases. Once consent is given, anything after that will come at cost councils to local council. A point before that about Traffic New South Wales and about where the numbers come from and they're plugged out of a book on a computer. I'm getting back to my point about I just don't know why local government exists anymore. We're elected by local people in our community because we know our community and we're all, in our own way, passionate about our community. yet we're asked to sit here and take recommendations out of a computer or a book from an office in Sydney somewhere in regard to traffic movements on a very dangerous corner that has had significant accidents not that long ago. Thank you.
So I'll just continue through those items you referred to as well. The conditions are fairly tight or very tight, particularly if you look at the first half a dozen or so on page 272, to try to reaffirm that this is we're only approving the level of development that was actually proposed. Anything more than that in regard to number of vehicles, what they do with the vehicles, even how they're transported. The requirements are that they have to be capable of actually being driven to the site. They can't even take a truck to the site. So they're very, very heavy requirements, but that's what they wanted in the application. Whether it happens in reality or not, time will tell, and we'll be watching that space. And if there's more action required by council will look at doing that at the time if required.
Thank you for that. Just on that point, you raised it. Tight, stringent restrictions, and at point 2, no vehicle washing. I don't know how many car yards you know that don't wash their vehicles every day at least. The compliance factor on council, if we were to agree to these terms, as I said before, would be enormous, given that we have trouble maintaining compliance with other businesses as we go along. But thank you.
Now, there's a couple other points you've got in here, particularly around gateway and aesthetics. You're correct. In the local strategic planning statement the council endorsed 2 years ago, there's a reference to how important that entrance is to Young along Olympic Way, and the need for further development of guidance by council about the development of that as a boulevard or entering statement to the town. That work hasn't been undertaken yet, but we should be taking into account strategically the need for that in the longer term. So yes, there is a role for that location or that strip along Olympic Way in regard to being of a higher amenity than probably find in other parts of town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone who wants to speak for the motion? Thank you. Councillor Stadmiller.
I'd like to speak for the motion just for the reason to make the following comments that there's been 22 concerns or objections, and it's clear that when council wants a report approved that they can find an answer for anything, and when they don't want a report approved they can also find an answer for everything. So I drove past the site today and it was flooded, and I have to agree with Councillor Ingram that it's not a overly suitable site, and we're opening ourselves up to a can of worms here. Forsyth Avenue suffered from a lack of enforcement, caused incredible problems for council when it came to enforcing issues on contractors and so forth, and this will be round 2. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question perhaps of Mr. Rowlands? I notice on page 251 that it says that the lands between the Olympic Highway and Big Spring Creek are Zone B6 Enterprise Corridor by the Young Local Environment Plan 2010, and encourages commercial and industrial land uses along the Olympic Highway, which such do not detract from the Young CBD. And I presume that such a small plot as this would be classed within this B6.
That's correct. B6 zone was in the old LEP, or current LEP, I should say, for Young. There's a B6 area at the bottom end of Olympic Way and also at the top end of Olympic Way from the north, into town. Both of them are considered to be like gateway, semi-commercial areas, but they weren't meant to have high-level retail servicing like you have in the CBD. So yes, this site is part of that precinct.
Councillor Flannery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of questions. Does the applicant have a dealer vehicle licence? And what ability does council have to enforce? Well, separate to that question, is the lack of a hard stand or concreted area one of the reasons why why aren't they permitted to wash down on site? And is it due to the lack of a hard stand, or is it because of runoff?
Okay, so I'll answer the first part about the licence, etc. And it sort of leads into some of the stuff mentioned by Councillor Ingram too. There's certain things that we can assess. They're not based on economic grounds. They're not based on whether they have a licence. They're just based on the assessment of the proposal on the site. So in regard to that licence, that's a separate matter. In regard to cleaning cars, etc., and servicing vehicles, that is not part of this proposal. And we consider that if it was, they would need to have a hard stand area and deal with more effectively with runoff if those things were to occur due to increase in potential pollution.
So, thank you for that response. So, to the DA, the LEP, sorry, and it said that it should not detract from the young town commercial precinct. Could it be argued that this is actually this application may be detracting from existing businesses that do have to have hard stands and wash their vehicles and undermine their sales?
Looking at the intent for the zone, it's more in relation to making sure that the types of activities occur out here are more large footprint, commercial, industrial, big box retail type activities, the ones that wouldn't really go in your main street. With the exception of that, at bottom end of Boorowa Street, they have Big W, Woolworths and Bunnings. They're talking about the more traditional main street and protecting those sort of uses. So when it comes to car sales yards, etc., that's a fairly standard type of activity in the B6 zone, and compared to what you find in the middle of the town, even though you have that hardened gearing at the end of our street as well, historically.
Thank you. I have another question.
Just a question through General Manager and Dave while he's up. Getting back to what Councillor England was saying, I don't think there's a person in this room would be able to say there's a second-hand car yard that doesn't wash their cars. Now, if we approve this and they start washing their cars, what could council do about it? We've already given permission to put the yard up.
Okay, so as it's stated directly in the conditions that they can't do that, that would be against the conditions of approval, and we can take action against them for not complying with conditions of consent.
So would that say, following on from Councillor Parker, that the concern would have to apply for another DA to put in that hard stand?
They would have to undertake actions to ensure the use was not continued, being the washing of the vehicles, remediating the impacts, and if they were to continue, yes, they'd have to make a new DA.
Okay. Are there any more?
Madam Mayor, just...
Councillor Armstrong, pardon me.
I'll be guarded with my remarks. I'll limit them to the roadway. It seems quite incredible to me that anyone could expect a car yard to not wash their cars when they have a 80 or 90 metres of gravel road immediately adjacent to the car yard. My experience with the area over the last 50 years has been quite extensive. And I'm quite certain that as vehicles drive up and down Malvicino's road, that there will be dust and there will be grit, and that dust and grit will land on cars, and those cars will need to be washed. I just can't see how that can occur any other way. I do note that the number of vehicle movements per day would appear to be a rather low estimate. If you consider cars going off premises to be washed and then coming back on again, I think that the number of movements would be significantly higher if you were to consider that need. At the end of the day, the sealing of the road is probably not an unreasonable request that perhaps would go some way towards reducing the nuisance that gravel and grit may create, the dust may create for the car yard. I think that's... as I mentioned earlier, we've assessed this against the requirements based on the scale of development proposed and what the requirements are under the DCP standards, etc. However, council consider that a higher standard is required because of the limitations of this site based on your views. You can request that to be put in the conditions of approval.
Thank you, Councillor Rollins. I called you Councillor again. There you go. Acting Director.
Councillor Flannery.
Councillor Flannery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, just having listened to the discussion and the answers, and given that it doesn't have any economic assessment, I think it's important that we as councillors realise that we have standards that we've set all along Olympic Way, and businesses have protested when some of those standards have been enforced by council in regard to access, ingress and egress. I think it's very clear that there are businesses who sell cars along Boorowa Street who do have high standards they have to maintain, and that comes at a cost, and we're undermining that whole process. I think council needs to reject this application.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Thank you for the debate. I think we've had some good points raised, and the discussion has certainly been, and questions have been answered by the staff as well. If there are no more questions...
Could I write a reply, please, Madam Mayor?
Oh, yes, certainly, Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong touched on one of the points I had noted down in regard to extra movements. If they had to take the vehicles off to be washed, but I noticed you were talking, you may not have picked that up. But the second thing I'd mention is, yes, the corridor, the B6 corridor was spoke about what might be able to be done by former councillors that were there before, and I was part of that council. But I can assure you, the intention of that council was never to grant consent to a tent city and 10 dirty cars sitting on a patch of grass on the entrance to Young. That was not the intent of the former council when that was done. So thank you, councillors, and as Councillor Flannery touched on, I just don't think any councillor in the room could sleep real easy passing this DA as it is presented to council now. So thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, can I just ask one question? David, you alluded to the fact that there was going to be something done about the whole gateway down the track, but this didn't have to sort of address that because that hadn't been done.
Yeah, there's a range of things that were raised through the local strategic planning statement and the workshops with councillors at the time in regards to these B6 zones. It was found that they weren't actually working, they were vacant. They are very constrained lands, particularly this wedge we're talking about because of vegetation, flooding, access issues, etc. So we wanted to try to find a way to go forward with a more consolidated approach to how we design those and get more success through those sites. This one's even more complicated because the wedge shape of it means by the time you work out the footprint that's usable, it narrows down to being quite small at the bottom end of that wedge, the thin edge of the wedge, as you could put it. In the LSPS, we recognised those limitations and said more work was required. That included upgrading the LEP requirements and having a more appropriate zone, which is in the Hilltops LEP, which hopefully we'll get soon, and also upgrading the DCP requirements. So there's more details about gateway treatments of our towns, particularly for Young, because it was really obvious there that we needed some work, and also the Boorowa and the entries along Burley Griffin Way and Harden as well. So all those things were proposed to be done. Timing for those, though, hasn't been determined as yet, but it is on the long-term program, I guess, for council to do those things, either directly as part of the consolidated DCP process or as subsequent amendments to that document.
Question, Madam.
Yes.
Just in regard to the my recollection of the B6 corridor was at the LSPS, the B6 was proposed that the B6 be abandoned as such, and that in the draft LEP there was no B6 zone in there at all. The recommendation was for an alternate zone.
That's correct. And as I mentioned, we were looking at a different zone as a result of the LSPS process. I haven't got the LEP in front of me, but from memory it was IN2, which is a standard type commercial industrial zone. It's a sort of zone that many of the things you'd find along MILVALE Road would fit into. So it gives a bit more flexibility, but hand in hand with the changes to the DCP that are proposed, hopefully the aesthetics would be a lot higher than we've got on MILVALE Road.
Okay, thank you. And once again, thank you for the discussion. I think we might...
Question, Madam Mayor.
Oh, yes.
If the recommendation was to fail as a motion, then what would be the effect of that? Would there be no consent, or would the consent be denied? I draw the differentiation between no consent and consent denied.
I will pass on to the experts.
That's a legal matter. The way I'd see it is because you're not granting the consent, there is no consent, it is denied. But we'd have to give justification for that denial.
And that's part of the question, isn't it? That justification. All right, councillors, have before you.
Just for the for those viewing, Councillor Armstrong declared and a non-pecuniary interest to participate in the debate but not participate in the vote, and he has left the chamber for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, all those in favour?
Those against?
Those against?
All those against is Councillor Foreman, Fitzgerald, Mackie, Rolls, Stadmiller, Hewson, Piper, Dodd, Flannery and Ingram. The motion is lost.
Question to the General Manager. Are we allowed to ask what the pecuniary interest was?
I did read that out earlier, Councillor Piper, and it was a close relative owns adjoining lands. I'll now just go call up. One of our staff will now collect Councillor Armstrong. Welcome back, Councillor Armstrong. Just for your information, the motion was put and the motion was lost unanimously. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. If we move on now to 11.7, 22/11,
So
DA 2022, Stadmiller, so moved. Second, Hewson, thank you. The recommendation is there. Do I have any comments? Questions?
Page 322, councillors. And Councillor Flannery appears to have a question.
It's yes, Councillor Flannery.
Thank you. It says there was no objections or submissions. Just looking from the picture, the neighbouring house, well, to the extent that I can see in the picture, on the photo on page 323, the building next door looks to be very close to where the shed's going to be located. Is that the house immediately adjacent, or is it another shed? I'm very surprised there's no objection.
That's actually a shed.
Right.
And there was no objections?
Correct.
They were notified. Question?
Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I just asked the question, were they notified?
Yes.
The acting director did say yes. I'm sorry if it didn't pick up on the microphone. Yes, they were notified. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager.
So there it is in front of us. If there's no further questions, put to vote. Those in favour?
Those in favour, Councillor Ingram, Foreman, Fitzgerald, Dodd, Rolls, Stadmiller, Hewson, Armstrong, Piper, Dodd. And Councillor Flannery, you are voting against.
Correct.
And Mackie, I'm sorry.
And Mackie.
Oh, and Mac, sorry. Thank you. And Councillor Flannery, that was you are against, yes?
Correct.
Thank you.
All on board and up to date. Now we're up to the 11.8, which is the CWP Renewables, Bango Wind Farm VPA Section 355 Committee.
So at this point, we, before the motion is put, we are to nominate either the mayor or your representative, so you can choose to be that person. And then it's nominate myself. So the question is before you, Madam Mayor, whether you'd like to take it on or open it to the floor.
I'm happy to open it to the floor if anybody else would be happy to take on this role.
Councillor Piper.
Councillor Piper.
Yes, I'll take on the job as one of the council representatives.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. So I think we can call for the recommendation now.
Yes, I'll, through me, I think it nominate the general manager or representative. At this point, I'll nominate myself to be party to this at this point in time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, the recommendation is there. We have.
Happy to move that way.
Thank you,
Question.
Councillor Ingram. Thank you, Councillor Hewson.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to make a comment?
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that who moved and seconded before we go to Councillor Stagner's questions.
Councillor Ingram.
So it's Councillor Ingram and seconded by Councillor Hewson. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'll catch up. Over to you, Councillor Stagner.
Just looking to find out what the monetary contribution for the community is. I couldn't find it on page 6.
It's $2,875 or something like that, which is a pitiful amount given the project's size and energy generation per turbine.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. It was on page 4. I was looking at page 6. I have to agree. Do we have any recourse to increase that amount or not, Madam Mayor?
I'll direct to the Director of Infrastructure.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is no recourse. This has been an agreement that has been signed and ratified by Council.
It was actually nominated by the state government. Council had no say in it.
Sorry, this is State Government Development Up. My apologies, Councillor Flannery.
Will it be reviewed in the future at all?
No.
No.
No. So it's for the life of the...
It's for the life of the project, yes, Madam Mayor.
How many turbines are in the wind farm?
They say up to a maximum of 75. It's an up to number. It doesn't mean that they will put in 75.
Okay. Any more questions? Comments? Okay, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? You don't have much choice, really.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you. Had a very interesting one. 11.9.22.13, accounting treatment of rural firefighting assets. The report is there and the recommendation, and I think we might ask our CFO to talk to this.
Yep. Move.
Second.
Have I moved it?
Yeah, it was moved by Councillor Fitzgerald and seconded by Councillor Stadmiller.
Yep. Pardon me.
Madam Mayor, yes. The document pretty well explains everything. So the issue is that the Audit Office in New South Wales last year in most of the regional councils, 58 in total, made the comment that the rural fire service assets were owned by or controlled by councils and should be included in their assets on the balance sheet. This has now come to a head, and obviously you're a member of the Audit and Risk Committee. I've got to get those papers up on the site now that I've got you, Deidre, back. But a number of councils are objecting to the fact that the assets are not controlled by councils individually. We don't purchase them, we don't maintain them, we don't service them, we have no say in the life of those assets or any other controls of those assets. So it's contrary to the Australian accounting standards in terms of control is not administered by council. I've repeated there the council resolution, which has actually been drafted by the Local Government Association, and you'll note in there an attached document quite extraordinarily from the Office of Local Government objecting to that determination by the Audit Office. There's been no response from the Auditor General, apart from the various councils that we're aware of that they've visited to date, where they've not reversed that decision. So I've actually put a call into CPA Australia. I think Anthony's going to do the same thing with CA Australia New Zealand to see whether they are willing to support the evidence that's before us. But basically, and the information that Ron Gillard, Chair of the Audit Committee, has been circulating recently is that the Auditor General is not apparently going to back down. Whether we'll be issued with a qualified audit report is a matter of question.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. The serious question before me professionally as both a chartered accountant and a CPA is my professional opinion is we do not control the assets and therefore we should not recognise them. This has been echoed by my counterparts who are also CEOs or general managers with financial qualifications, and certainly it's been raised by many of the responsible accounting officers who have designation themselves as professional members of either both or separately those organisations. It is incumbent upon us to uphold adherence to the Australian accounting standards, and it is our professional opinion that this does not qualify for recognition. So at this juncture, I'm unaware that any other council has reached out to the relevant associations, but Norm will be doing it for CPA and I'll be doing it for the Chartered to see their view, because it is totally unacceptable that something that we don't say what type of truck is bought, where the truck is housed, who drives the truck, how the truck is maintained, how the truck is, what petrol goes into the truck, where the truck goes. We don't control any of those things at all, and we have no involvement or no influence over the Rural Fire Service. So how can we possibly control those assets? And the most simple thing that in that regard is, can we sell those assets? No. So how can we control them? Thank you.
As well, that we would not even be convinced that we actually get it. Sorry, sir. Yeah, we're not even convinced that we'd actually get the accurate value. In other words, we're not actually getting a independent valuer, and so therefore we'd be relying on RFS giving us a value. When I looked at last year's assessment by the Audit Office, I'd have to say that was grossly understated at 2.4 million, based on the value of assets that likely exist in this shire.
And certainly, to keep it very simple terms, the big red trucks, we've heard estimates of $800,000 per truck as a minimum. I'm sorry, Councillor Flannery, you have a question.
Yes, do we even get a RFS budget? Once upon a time, we used to get the local Southwest Slopes RFS budget because council had to make a contribution. So we never got any say in it. But they used to pay us the courtesy of sending the budget through, which is invariably after the financial year had even started, which was how little regard they had for us.
Yes, Councillor Fenner. Well, no, Councillor Fenner, you're quite correct, and that's a good point that I've raised in the report. The depreciation will hit our income statement. So it'll be on our bottom line. And no, we've not received any advice about a budget being provided that obviously would correspond with the expense that will be in our books.
Thank you. I don't know that they actually budget. I don't think it's written across their desks anyway.
Councillor
Just a
Fisher.
question, Norm. A qualified audit report, does that detail why it's qualified?
Does that detail, sorry, what was I?
Why it's qualified?
The issue is whether there's any ramifications from that. Now, there's 58 rural councils involved where this is required. I've spoken to a couple that are basically going to take the same position that has been circulated right across the state. That'll be an interesting issue in terms of the Auditor General presenting a report to Parliament if that's the case, and they qualify 58. Depending on those, there is one or two apparently have had according to Ron Gillard, had their gun put to their head. I think as Anthony said, we'll check with CPA Australia. We may just get a straight out opinion based on what we know, which is it shouldn't be included in our accounts because it's contrary to the accounts, the AASB 101. So the issue would be, does it have a ramification on T Corp in relation to loans that we hold? That's a question that I've got to follow up. And whether there's any further ramifications is another question.
Just echo that. Usually condition for grants, etc. and so forth is you receive an unqualified audit report. Well, it's an unmodified audit report is the terminology now. However, having said that, if it's black and white and they have to apply that, that's why it's so important that we get this right. If it's legislated that the law is passed that it supersedes the Australian accounting standards, so be it. But I think our peers at the Chartered Accountancy Australia, New Zealand, and I think the Certified Practicing Accountants will have something to say about that. But there may be impacts in relation to a qualified audit report. We can't say categorically that grants would be denied because strength in numbers is one thing. There is a lot of discontent with this for all the reasons, because ultimately, without a change in the operational influence that we may be able to place on RFS, which is nothing, all we're being asked to do is carry the can on depreciation, to put it in layman's terms, and that just hits our bottom line rather than the state's.
Just a question through the General Manager. Just Little Hilltops is a big area council, and we'd have a lot of firefighting equipment. In BOOROWA and our little villages, we have 22 units in that little area. And just another one to add to our legal stand, why has SES been left out?
Well, this is one of and you've certainly the documentation and it's raised there is the emergency services are not, they are separately accounted for. And what's the other one, Norm? That the fire and rescue are also, we're not asked for those. And so there's no differentiation between those state bodies. And RFS, let's be honest, is a state body. So why this? There's been no satisfactory answer provided to us on why control is stated to be vested in us. The closest thing to an explanation was the view of the DPI, the Department of Primary Industries, had said, well, we're of the view in the initial report they did that we don't own the asset, so therefore the audit office says, well, the federal don't own them, the state don't own them. Well, it must be local government that own them by default for no other reason. The department subsequent to that has given a view is, well, they're not comfortable with that view either, and that's their latest thinking, is they clarified as just like, well, we're not convinced that it is council. So that's the conundrum at this point. but it is, I would say, it is inconsistent. Now, one of the things that often faces council is we often talk about precedent, and precedent is once it's happened once, etc. Do it. The precedent has been set by the state government in relation to those emergency services organisation would dictate that it's not us.
My recommendation to this council would be to just sit on our hands and not do anything, and get together with all the other councils of the state, because I don't think there's a council in the whole state can afford to pay the depreciation on the fire rescue.
I think that's what the recommendation is.
I was about to say, the recommendation, I think all your points are included in that.
Just a question or two on the recommendation. Just a couple of things that concern me. We mentioned Honourable Stephanie Cook as Minister for Emergency Services and Wendy Tuckerman as the Minister for Local Government, but only Wendy Tuckerman as a local state member. Should we add Steph Cook as a local state member as well? Just in terms of being polite?
Certainly that is an oversight. We had intended to, it's both, at this point in time, both Tuckerman MP and Cook MP both are ministers, and we actually it is our other.
Just a question, Mr. Gentleman, how many letters are we writing there to those? We're writing letters to them as ministers and then letters to them as local members, or are we going to save the postage and do?
I think we would be addressing them in both capacities, that both in their capacity as minister, and representing their community, and that's something that we can do of our own volition.
Yes, 7.
Okay.
So just for the purposes of the local state members, and I do know Cook is spelled with a little E on the end. Thank you.
Point on the page 381, the wording there, leaders of the shooters, fishers, farmers, Animal Justice, One Nation Party, Robert Borsak. Robert Borsak is the leader of the shooters and fishers. So I got him in twice.
Oh, I see, yes.
Just a pedantic point.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll just take out.
She's the honourable, isn't she?
Yeah, it's in the recommendation. Yeah.
Okay, once we get the semantics worked out.
That's right. So the leaders of the shooters, fishers, animals, and it should be comma being respectively One Nation parties. I love having teachers in the mix. One Nation parties, comma, yep, comma, being in order. Being in order. Yep. Being in order.
More worry.
Well, that's it. Thank you.
Zero, like zero.
Just for the remind, we had Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Stadmiller moved and seconded this motion. Thank you.
Righto, thank you, councillors. We've had a fair bit of discussion, and thank you, Norm, for your information. If everybody's happy, to put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you. All right, we move on to 1110, 2214 and the works report. And do I have a mover for this? Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald, and a seconder, Councillor Armstrong. Question from Councillor Flannery.
Thank you. A few questions, Madam Mayor. Has Council had to hand out back any road grant funding recently for works that it was not able to complete on gravel or sealed roads is one question. Chums Lane, Hinton Road, it refers to in the paper. I've lost it now. I think it says repair. I'll just have to find it again. I'm sorry. Pavement rehabilitation. Could we get a definition of pavement rehabilitation? Has there been any assessment done on Monteagle Road? Given and could we get from the director or relevant person details of work that occurred on Monteagle Road in the past 2 years? And could we be advised of what is happening as far as resealing of Olympic Highway, where sewer main and water main replacement has occurred? I notice some of the work has occurred for a significant period, but there's been no resealing of it, and it's becoming washed out with all the rain.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Flannery, are you referring to the Monteagle Stock Road or the Scenic Road?
Scenic Road. It was
no Monteagle Road.
With the advent of COVID and losing track of time, there was a reseal put on it. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, for a considerable distance. Preceding that, the shoulders were graded twice, I gather because the reseal didn't happen within the adequate period the first time, so it had to be graded a second time. And now there are significant patches that have completely broken down. So I'd like to know an estimate of the money that was spent on it in the last 24 months and what assessments have been done on the road in the recent period.
Thank you. Director of Infrastructure.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The first question, handback of grant funding for roads. There has been no handback of grant funding at this point in time. The next three questions regarding Chums Lane pavement rehabilitation and the definition of that, the assessment of scenic road, the works done over the last 2 years and the money cost that was spent on scenic road, I will take that on notice. And then the repair on Olympic Highway, we have had some more work that the contractor has had to do before we could finalise that sealing. So we are working with the contractor on that.
So there's been no grant funding handed back at all, or hasn't been able to be, probably the better word might be, or phrase, funding that we were of the understanding that we were to receive, but weren't able to receive it because we didn't get the work done in time. So there's been absolutely no grant funding that's either been missed or handed back because we didn't have work done in time on gravel roads or rural roads.
So the question now is about whether or not we have not spent grant funding money and have lost that money because we have not done the work. Again, the answer is we have been working with the grant funding bodies to ensure that we continue to have the money, and we have not handed back any money or not had penalties against us because we didn't complete the work.
Were we advised we would get, I'm reliably told that it might be different, so I want to be clear. So there's been no grants that we've been awarded, but only were to receive the money after we do the work. There's been no money received and had to hand back, or there's been no any other terminology in relation to grants in roads that we haven't been able to utilise the money.
To my knowledge, Councillor, no.
Could you please come back to Council for the next meeting and confirm that there has been no lack of utilisation, or whatever phrase I might need to use, in relation to grant funding for rural and gravel roads?
I will take that on notice, Councillor.
Thank you.
And in relation to Chums Lane and Hinton's Road, it says, I've lost the page again, an upgrade of work. Rehabilitation, what could we get a definition on pavement rehabilitation, please?
I have noted that as a question on notice, Councillor.
I don't mean to be rude, but as a director, I would have hoped that you would know what that means.
With respect, Councillor, it's not to debate with staff. We've taken that question on notice, so we will bring a response to you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Flannery. Thank you, Director. A question?
Question just through you, Madam Mayor. It'd be fantastic if Council could find out just exactly which roads have been subject to gravel resheeting and the length of those roads over the full year, the full financial year. Because I'll be quite truthful, in the current reporting regime, it's impossible to do. So, can we get a report for the next meeting that tells us what we did last year and where we did it?
How much it was.
Oh, well, where we and how much it cost, I suppose. That's the other thing. Because it goes directly to our budget and it goes directly to service levels.
Director?
I'll take that on notice, Councillor. Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor?
Question?
No.
Councillor Ingram.
Councillor Ingram.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of questions that were already asked. In regard to taking questions on notice, I've been waiting to get a response from questions on notice at our last council meeting in regard to the works report. It doesn't look like there's any coming today. I hope I haven't jumped the gun, but I thought they may have been in the, Mr. General Manager, in your newsletter, the last paragraph of your newsletter is if there's any questions on notice left unanswered, they would be answered in your newsletter. Well, there's no answers there neither. Now, I can remind you of what the questions were. It was in regard to the funding, the LRCIP funding for the last 2 years and the other funding for roads that the officer said they'd take on notice for 21, 22 and 2021. I note in correspondence to a fellow councillor, you mentioned that there's no need to go back so far and deal with prehistorical numbers. And I've got no objection to that, but the current ones, so councillors can, just as Councillor Armstrong alluded to, understand the levels of service and where it's been done. I'd like those questions answered. If staff aren't too sure of what the questions were, they only have to go back to the recording of last month's meeting under the works report. And when I've got your attention, Mr. General Manager, I'd hate you to miss something I'm saying and have to go back to this one as well. And check those questions on notice out and bring the answers forward, please. The other question I have, in regard to the matters that I mentioned, one of the other questions was the budget overrun, Mr. General Manager, and how that happened, Mr. General Manager, and who missed out on the money, Mr. General Manager, with the overrun of the budget for the gravel reshooting in the former Boorowa area. And I note that on top of that, and the question is, Grassy Creek Road, and I think the officer confirmed the last meeting that was in the Boorowa, former Boorowa Shire area. More work has been done there. So hopefully that came out of the 22-23 budget and not out of the 21-22, as the 21-22 budget was already overspent by 80%. Now, I'm happy to take it on notice again, but I would like the answers in your newsletter or at our next council meeting, please.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. I will follow up those questions.
Well, it just seems a waste of your time and our time if we're told that we will get responses either at a council meeting or in your newsletter, and it clearly states your last newsletter, there is no outstanding questions. And I'm sorry, but that's incorrect, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Duly noted.
Okay. Councillor Flannery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, just also in relation to gravel resheeting and look, I make the point for the councillors, new councillors who might think we're getting bored to tears with this, but we are actually a roads council. There's councils who, the majority of their budget is spent on roads, are referred to as roads councils, and sadly, for better or worse, that's what we are. That's where most of our money goes. And if things are not done properly, that's why we have no money for the rest of the community. So I encourage you, if you're not interested in it, to get interested in it, because if we don't do road repairs properly and we've got to go back and do it, then there's no money left for the rest of the community. And that's two reasons. One is I pay considerable rates, probably three. Two is that I see the roads deteriorate with inside what is reasonably determined as the depreciation life of the road after significant upgrade work's done. So therefore, we've got to go back and spend money on it again. And then three, as a community member, I like to see money spent on parks and gardens and other beautification projects. And if we don't do the roads properly, either the service levels on them drop or we can't do the parks and gardens and other things properly. So I do find it frustrating when some of these, what might be referred to as boring topics, are raked over. But my question is, have we had to buy gravel from any neighbouring councils, gravel or metal from any neighbouring councils? If the director could take that on notice, if there is not an answer available at this council meeting.
I'll take it on
or
notice.
Neighbouring pits.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Flannery, for your question. If there are no more questions, I will put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Flannery against. Okay, it has been passed. Thank you. Pardon me. The action summary report. It's in front of you, councillors, and the recommendation, note the status of the action plan. Mr. GM, do you want to make any comments on this before we go?
It's before you, councillors. I will say that when I first arrived, this action summary report was 16 pages long. So we've made progress, which is a good thing. Thank you.
And I think I need a mover. Thank you. And a seconder?
Seconder with a question.
Armstrong? Yes, thank you. Councillor Armstrong, and a question.
Resolution 12.10, 22/13, Boorowa Gaylong Rail Trail. I note there's a remaining $35,000 from last year's budget was to go to the scoping of a pedestrian access and mobility plan. I'm just wondering whether that $35,000 was spent in that scoping, and if it hasn't been, will that $35,000 come back to council as a carried forward amount in September? Thirdly, when will the scoping of a PAMP be undertaken?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I will pass to our CFO to answer those questions.
Councillor Armstrong, you would have noticed in the papers for the end of the year, the 25 we did, that was allocated and spent, the 35 wasn't spent, and we'll come back to council. And if you have I haven't got it with me, but if you have a look at the papers from the last meeting, it's recorded in there, we've actually done that adjustment.
Thank you. Councillor Flannery. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When will we see a PAMP?
When we will see a PAMP, I will now throw to the Director of Infrastructure.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the PAMP scoping has commenced, and we will continue to. We are looking at available resources to ensure that we can scope it adequately. As you're aware, $35,000 is not a lot of money for a PAMP, the scoping thereof. So we are seeing how we can manage that better, and we have put together some sort of a scope that we are testing with some experts out there, because it is something that needs to happen. I do not have a final date on when that will be available as yet.
Thank you. And Councillor Dodd? Councillor Dodd has a
Or
question.
Councillor
Or Councillor Flannery first and then Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could the two items be put back on the action summary report? I hate to think that they went missing, but the Gaylong Limestone Park has been through two iterations of consultation and consultants' fees, but has disappeared off the radar, and it is by and large to be funded by VPA money. So it's really just a case of council actioning the work. It has, on my understanding, is virtually no impact on our budget. And then Murrumbula Creek, we voted to accept the off-market negotiations with, I've forgotten the name of the company, Delaney Civil. Could we please have it put back on the action summary report until we become aware of progress on those two matters?
Through you, Madam Mayor, on the first one, I'll have to defer to you on that. But on the second one, the resolution was for us to undertake those negotiations, and it's under my delegation. I'm happy to bring a report back to you as the outcome of those delegations, but it's not an outstanding point per se. So I'll take that as a question on notice for a report to be brought back before you. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Well, perhaps the Limestone Park can be put back on the action summary report.
Thank you.
Just a question about the plans of management, and is there an update, just a verbal update would be fine, about how that's going and the review of that process, and is that sort of just how it's progressing?
The plans of management that are referenced there are the Crown Reserves, and we have appointed a consultant. We have seen a few versions of that, and we are continuing with that process right now.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, comments, I'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Yes, now we go back to the late report that everybody has in front of them. 11/12/2216, consideration of the amended VPA and deed of agreement for Gaylong Limestone Facility as advertised. And do I have a mover? Or I'm happy to move it. And a seconder? Piper.
Any questions? I think Councillor Flannery, you have your hand up on the screen, so you do have a question. You're on mute, Councillor. Councillor Flannery, you are on mute.
Yep, sorry, trying to read because I'm not in the building and don't have the benefit. I've got to swap between screens, trying to read the recommendation and also stay on. But no, I don't have a question at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
Yes, I do have a question. Well, since it's a late report, I haven't been able to look at it in great detail, but are there any specific issues of concern or that we should note as councillors from the Acting Director of Planning?
Acting, double acting. Good question. You're right. There was a late report, and the reason for that was the submissions on the VPA for public consultation only finished on Friday night. So we finished the review of submissions earlier this week, and then had a report prepared following that. The biggest items that came out through the submission process, which probably answers your questions, are not so much about the amount of money being raised, but how it was going to be distributed between community and roads. And there've been a lot of agreements made in various ways, whether it be committee level or through discussions, etc., for how that would be done over the years in a 1/3, 2/3 split. But it was never actually endorsed by council, and it was never in the VPA. So you'll notice the recommendation this time around is probably 2 to 3 times longer than it was a month ago. That's because we propose to have greater clarity about that distribution in a separate document, because it really is agreement between the council and the community, not really between the council and Greymont. Because the VPA is really between Greymont and council. This allows the community and council to regularly review that distribution, but also the program of works, which comes back to something raised earlier by Councillor Flannery about Limestone Park, for example. It's a chance for us to reset what is actually in that master plan and further confirm the latest costs and prioritisation of those works and the other works the community might have to put up to council, and council can consider that on a yearly basis and put it into a program of works for 5 years. So at the moment, the recommendation is a 20-80 split. That's closer to what the real costs are. It looks like the costs in regard to road over the next 30 years is actually 90-10. But taking into account the previous thing being a third or two-thirds, that 20-80 split was something that was considered might be appropriate for council. Of course, it's up to you to determine that. And it's also something that was discussed with some of the submitters and community members as well, and it came out of that process.
I do have a question now.
Over to you, Councillor Flannery.
If we adopted the recommendation as is written, what is the ability? Is it just a resolution of council to, let's say, significant work was required on a road and there were insufficient funds for that work to occur? Is it just a resolution of council to vary for a minimum period? Is it? I mean, this is an internal restriction, or what restriction is this? Is it an internal restriction? How does it operate? Or should we just put in there that council can borrow from one fund to the other on an as-needs basis?
The best way to answer that is that the VPA sets limitations on what contributions can be used in general as a public purpose, and in Schedule 4 that document lists the roads that are affected, and that reflects the ones in the conditions of consent from the DA approved by council back in March 2019. So if it's for those roads, there is the ability for council to reconsider if any other works are required over the life of those in consultation with that committee and going back to council. Now, the main reason for that is we wanted to make sure that that flexibility is there based on new information or issues that come up, rather than having to go back and revise the VPA, which would just slow the process down and actually build in an extra step of governance, which isn't really required. Because like I said before, this is more about conversations with the community and council about spending the money, not between Greymont and council.
Thank you for that answer. So it's a council decision. There's no reference, because it wasn't on the radar at the time of the original VPA, to the rail trail, and it would seem, well, about obvious. That might not have been obvious to me, but not to others. And given council's concern, the concern of some councillors about where funding may come from for the maintenance of the rail trail, what variations, if any, may need to be included either in the VPA or the resolution to allow for the rail trail and or its maintenance to be included as part of use of the funds?
So in regard to the VPA itself, the scope of what a public purpose is and further in the local community through that Schedule 4 in the VPA, there is room for some elements at least of that rail trail to be considered by the community and as advice, and then council to determine whether they want to do that or not. The idea, though, is through this program we're proposing in the recommendations, it's not about the rail trail, it's not about a specific activity, it's about any activities the community and council find are relevant to the upgrading of activities and community facilities around Gaylong, whether they be the rail trail, Limestone Park, street works, even infrastructure works. So it really is about the conversation between community and council about determining those and then building them into the program as proposed in the recommendations.
Thank you.
Councillor Foreman, did you have a question?
I didn't have a question, but I would just like to say that Margaret and I did sit in an honour meeting with Dave and some constituents in regards to this, and I had a pretty thorough look over it this afternoon, and Dave's done a good job, and I think it covered off everything that was asked in the meeting that we had, and I think it's quite thorough. And and the reason behind the way Dave has set that out is actually goes to how the community was feeling when we did meet with them. So I'd just like to say well done.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Armstrong.
I just noticed on page 34 that the construction of a footpath around Gaylong, in addition to the footpath described in condition 99, is struck out. I'm just wondering whether whether that construction of the footpath around Gaylong would include the construction of the footpath through Limestone Park, which still hasn't been done. And at the very recent community engagement regards to the community strategic plan at Gaylong, the community members there expressed their very deep concern that if other projects weren't to go ahead, that project should come to the fore. So I'm just wondering, why would it be struck out in this if it's not done?
Okay, so there's two parts to that. First part is there's actually a condition in the the old consents, including the one back in March 2019, explicitly mentioning a footpath to be upgraded at the cost of the proponent. And they're undertaking those works and in discussions with the community about doing those at the moment. I think, Mark, is there any update on that at this stage? No? So it is still a requirement under the consent, so it's not lost there. Other thing is Schedule 4, which I think is the page you're looking at there in the VPA itself. That is not an exclusive list. That list just tells you some of the things that have to be put in that program, not everything. And the idea there is that over time, since 2016, when the original VPA was done, and even on a yearly basis, the conversations around what's a priority for that community and the real costs changes. So the proposed approach will help resolve that, make sure things like the footpath, if they think they're really important, they're put back in the agenda. There's more clarity about the timing for those and the cost for those for council to consider in its entirety.
I'm a bit lost with that response. I think you were at that meeting and the footpath was raised, and the recommendation from the community was that if the other works couldn't go ahead, such as the landscaping, that was the first preference.
Yep.
Yet I see it here struck out. I accept that this isn't meant to be a totally exhaustive list, but I would have thought where there's something that was quite specific and that the community was asking about, that we probably would have ensured that would have stayed in there rather than been removed.
I'll have to go back and look at the notes from the meeting, because I think the actual bit of footpath we're talking about isn't the exact same one you're talking about. There's actually bits of it that go through the park, but also along the road frontage.
Just to go back down from the hall, back down to the intersection of the road, and then back along.
So the wording in here is basically put in a way so it doesn't matter where it actually is. If the community want it and council endorse it happens. Because there was some lack of clarity about the master plan that was approved about which bits they actually wanted to go ahead with and when. So this gives us a chance to have a fresh conversation around that. Because I know you're talking about one particular footpath. That footpath actually is referred to in three different ways in the consent, and the VPA, and the conversations for that community. This gives us a chance to clean it up.
I think it's the final part of the footpath.
I hope so, because that's the bit we've been looking at. So, yeah, it's still on the agenda, but it's not in the VPA.
Surely we can't construct a footpath around Gaylong if we don't construct the last part.
So the wording, I'll go to that page just so everyone knows what we're looking at. It's in Schedule 4 towards the back of the VPA.
Look, I don't want to debate the construction of the footpath. I'm wondering why it's got a line drawn through it when clearly it's an issue that's very near and dear to the hearts of the community of Gaylong.
Yeah, so like I said, the things that have been lined out are either already underway or covered by other things such as the conditions of consent. So it's only two reasons they'd be out. But like I said, if there happens to be another footpath and that was a reference to another part of that network in the master plan, that can be picked up through this process as proposed in that 5-year work plan.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Stanmiller.
I'd like to speak against this because this could have been coming for a long time or left to another meeting. To get a 75-page document the morning of a meeting, I resent that occurring. And then to digest it all, I understand that there's a number of submissions with people unhappy with this. The Gaylong Rail Trail is going to need some serious funding, so reducing the amount of money that can go from this down to 20% towards a project like that would only negatively impact that, along with every other project that Gaylong wants to do within that community. So far, it's been a cluster of mistakes and missing funds and inability to find the actual amount. which has resulted in a colour bond fence and a couple of other things go up over the last half decade. So the only two people that are really going to cop a fair bit of flack over this is Councillor Flannery and myself. The director's potentially not going to be here next month or next year, who knows, and neither is the general manager, but we're going to continue to live in the community for the next 40, 50 years. And if the people of Gaylong are unhappy with this, which they appear to be, I certainly won't be voting on it to lower the amount of money that's going to go into that community. So I hope that the councillors can realise that.
Councillor Flannery.
Look, I appreciate Councillor Stadmiller's comments. However, this did come to council before it went out into public display, and it's now gone out in public display. So we've had more than adequate time, I believe, to look at the document of 75 pages. It's slightly amended, but the VPA itself is of the same substance that went before Harden Council. The amount of money that is now being contributed by Greymont or the mine owners, it really doesn't matter, it changes every 5 years, really is coming from those who buy the lime, because they just add it to the cost of the lime, and I commend the new agreed rate. I, as a farmer who uses lime, have no problem in paying the additional money that will no doubt be levied to maintain our roads. There is actually a significantly, under this allocation, and as pointed out by the director, is a significantly larger amount going to the Gaylong community, because it was by and large a gentleman's agreement, and it's not for the mine owner to determine the allocation, but there was a gentleman's agreement that 30% would go to the Gaylong community for the trucks were going through Gaylong by and large, and 70% to roads. But the real issue is the real cost to council is road maintenance. It's an improvement in services that the money is spent on in Gaylong, for want of a better way of putting it. I don't wish to undermine that, but council at the end of the day has to fund the road infrastructure, and if there's insufficient funds there, it goes back to the ratepayers of the broader community. The fact that we're going from 320,000 tonne to, I think, 430 and the increased rate means that Gaylong residents or the Gaylong community will be in a receipt that will go from roughly 75,000 per annum to 120,000. So you're talking in the order of a 60% lift in the funding available to them on an annualised basis. But the truck movements and the roads that council is going to have to care for, noting Gaylong Road is a local road and we receive no FAG grants or any other grants for it, will have to come out from the general fund, and that goes to ratepayers. So I think this is actually a good outcome and I support it. But I do understand your comments, but it's a percentage, change of percentage, but the dollar terms will be substantially more to the Gaylong community.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. If there are no more comments, thanks, Dave, for your contribution. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Foreman, Fitzgerald, Mackie, Dodd, Hewson, Armstrong, Piper, Mackie, Flannery, Ingram. I don't know why I'm doing that, Councillor Mackie. And those against, Councillor Stadmiller.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. Okay. We're back on track to 12, correspondence for information, media releases, and Office of Local Government circulars. The recommendation is there. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Foreman and Councillor Dodd. Any comments? If not, those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. 13, question without notice. With notice, pardon me. 2217, the construction certificate information. And I think we will go to the Acting Director of Planning for this.
Would you like me to speak to my question first, Madam Mayor?
Certainly. Councillor Ingram.
There's no need for the acting director to give a 10-page summary. The question that was asked, and I thank them for their response. The first question was at what stage? The answer is before any work is done, before anything commences. The second question was, is it illegal to build such a building without a construction certificate? The answer to that is yes. The question that leads to what action can be taken by council, there's a number of things, or there can be nothing. My question, to keep it short and sweet, would be, how, reading the response in item 1B and the rest of the response, how would it be possible, let's have a hypothetical, for someone to build a really large industrial shed and be operating in it in 2015 and then have a construction certificate dated in 2017? How would that be possible?
Okay. Ready.
Okay. There's one word you said there which sort of negates the conversation. That's hypothetical. And the reason I say that is it all depends on the circumstance and how it was actually managed through the assessment process. At the end of the day,
I'll just jump in and help you there, and I'll take the word hypothetical out. The reason for it happening, I can answer the reason for it happening, because I was told. And councillors, this is what was said to us, as a number of councillors were present at the time. We can't be waiting around for bloody young council all this time. That's the reason it was done, and that's the reason that the people gave to councillors at the time. I'll let you continue.
We'll have to come back to you on this, because now you're getting into the detail about a particular site and a particular process, which happened several years ago. We'll have to go back and investigate that matter in more detail and come back to council.
Thank you. It's been asked and answered. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to accept the report. Okay, and seconder, Armstrong. Thank you.
The motion's been put, so all those in favour, we have Fitzgerald, Mackie, Rolls, Piper, Dodd, Hewson, Armstrong, Ingram, Flannery, Stadmiller. This is just to receive and note the report. Those against, Councillor Foreman.
Next one, question with notice, 13/2/2218, public speaking process. The question is before you.
Pardon
me. I didn't have my...
Happy to move. Happy to move.
Thank you. Councillor Ingram.
Second. Councillor Hewson.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions?
Yeah. The question that was put on notice is in regard to a matter that was brought to my attention after our last council meeting. So I just thought it may need to be re-outlined for everyone to realise, and especially nowadays when we are so often reminded of code of conducts and code of meeting practices and codes of this and codes of that. And I personally have been pulled up. Apparently, at some times when I speak, I can sound intimidating, so I don't mean to do that, but I'll talk a bit softly. But there's an easy way around resolving this matter of speakers in public forum, and that's to go back to where we used to be and notify all councillors when the applications to speak in the public forum come in and are received. That way it will take any doubt out of anyone's mind, and then there won't have to be decisions made without what could be breaching the code of meeting practice. Just in regard to the code of meeting practice, while I'm on that, it might be an idea for all councillors to go through it again, given tonight's manner in which actually the Deputy Mayor and Mayor just addressed councillors and staff. We have a code of meeting practice of how we are to address people, Madam Mayor, and I would suggest if we want the public to take us seriously, rather than calling each other Tom and Bob and Dick and Harry, we go by the directors and by Madam Mayor and Mr. General Manager. But again, that question has been asked and answered, and I'm happy to let it go. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Ingram, and I do stand corrected.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and just that's an excellent idea, Councillor Ingram, and I'll introduce that measure. During my time, that hadn't been the practice. However, I will reintroduce that. So at the appointed time, so as articulated in the response, we are to anyone to speak must be by noon on the Tuesday before the date of the meeting. So once that's happened, so sometime on the Tuesday afternoon, once we've collated that and the minute secretary has checked, we will distribute that to all councillors for their information. So thank you, Councillor Ingram.
Question to the General Manager in regards to those actions. That would form because the open forum takes place during the council meeting. Those applications and their notification to council would form a public list. Is that your?
They do form part of the minute, so I don't see any reason why we can't put it on just a list as part of just next to the agenda. So yes, we can do that.
You would need to ensure that the application forms advise
Yep, no,
the
absolutely.
applicants of that.
Yep, good idea. Thank you.
All right. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Yes, unanimous.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we move on to notice of motion, 2214, 2219, motion poll of electors regarding a demerger. And Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, the bulk of the information is contained within the report. At the end of the day, none of us can sit here and say that we know definitively yes or no. We don't know the answer to this. No one was ever asked. Here's an opportunity to once and for all finish the debate in terms of what the community sentiment is. It's certainly disappointing to think that the community were never given this opportunity. Right from the word go. It's disappointing to think that 5 years on, we're still, or 6 years on, in actual fact, we're still undecided about the position of the community in that regard, and there is great conjecture out there. With this motion, I propose that conjecture, council has an opportunity to bring that conjecture to an end fearlessly. Whether the answer is a yes or a no remains to be seen, but I think council needs to be fearless in that and accept the response. At the end of the day, this is not a constitutional referendum. There is nothing binding attached to this, and if it were to occur during at the next council election, it would be the council afterwards that would need to decide whether they were going to do something with it or not this council. So I'd ask you to consider the issue of democracy and what was missed out, what hasn't been attached to it, and take this opportunity to support council in moving forward in finally drawing a line under this community sentiment, whichever way it goes.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, who has moved it, and a seconder.
Happy to second.
Questions?
Can I just have a question of Councillor Armstrong?
Sir.
So I'm assuming that you want a yes or no vote at the next full election of council, not one next week where some underhanded sort of things are done. And whatever the decision comes, either yes or no, that there's nothing binding to the council to act on that.
In the report, the recommendation is very clear. That is, that council would at the earliest opportunity and in conjunction with a local government election, council resolved to conduct the poll of electors for the purpose of gaining community guidance for the Hilltops Council and to assess community sentiment regarding any demerger of Hilltops Council. So it's for the purpose of gaining guidance and assessing community sentiment. There are no actions other than those actions in there. Like if anyone can find in there demerge council or something else that they're dramatically opposed to in there, then please let me know, because I didn't write them in there. If you're reading them in there, then you're reading something that's not contained within the words. It's only to assess community sentiment and to gain some community guidance from the community in regards to opportunities that council may have presented to itself at the next subsequent to the next local government election. It's not committing council to anything at all other than the holding of a poll.
Madam Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Certainly.
I'm just wondering if there is some sort of disgruntled sentiment out there, because I was looking at the words, in the background summary, considerable and ongoing debate, claimed lack of broad community support for the merger, comprehensive community consensus. Sounds like this overwhelming lack of trust or lack of understanding even about the process of amalgamation. And I'm wondering, is it such a big wave of sentiment against amalgamation?
Councillor, I'd suggest that this is the best way to find out. I can see that this is an opportunity that would put your mind 100% at rest. Certainly would mine.
Well, my concern, it's actually going to bring up a whole heap of query and dissatisfaction that perhaps doesn't even exist. I'm just going on the sentiment that I feel when I talk to people, that I know well in Boorowa. I can't talk to Young or Harden, but like me, a lot of them seem very confident in what's in the process. I call it early days, and a part of the early days is, and I've said it before here, that no one, when amalgamation was first thought of, that we were going to have catastrophes like we have with, the weather and COVID. So I just don't know if it just undermines confidence of the council.
I have a question as far as this. Maybe, Mr. General Manager, I note for any sort of what can I put it? Can't think of the word. A referendum. Thank you. It's COVID fog, I say, or old age, one of the two. Where does the money come for this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, given there would be an additional cost to attach a referendum to a local government election as articulated in the mix, it's as stipulated as the time period between 1st of September 2022 and 30th September 2024. So any election, local government election during that time, it would have to be voted as part of an estimate of the costs of the election at that time. So should there be an election for whatever purpose, March next year instead of March the following year, which it's scheduled, should they be resolved to pass this motion, estimates would be done and the council would have to vote in that the budget. The way in which the budgeting element works, however, is given that this, if this council goes its full term to September 2024, it is like 2 budgets ahead, so that budgeting process would form with this standing there. Council staff would bring before the council for that 24-25 year, because it's a resolution of council, it would be form part of that budget as part of a natural process because it had already been determined to do this action. So it's not seeking funding immediately unless something would happen in the immediate purpose of this financial year. Then we would have to come to you and seek that funding. So that's why the question about the funding issue, which is incumbent upon me as part of the Code of Meeting Practice to talk about where that funding might be. It's a question that can't be answered because it's an unknown timeline. However, council would have to vote the appropriate level of funding to undertake the local government election, whatever that would be, whether it's the full election or effectively a by-election, and the funding would have to be sought at that point.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Dodd and then Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Hilltops is moving forward under strong financial management, and we need to complete that process, and we need a commitment to moving ahead and not looking back. And like Councillor Mackie said, I do not feel that there is an overwhelming sentiment in the council area looking for a demerger. And I think that to make a decision for a poll to happen in 2 years' time is focusing our energy in the wrong direction. And like Councillor Mackie said, it's putting that idea in people's heads instead of giving us the opportunity to keep moving forward as Hilltops. And I think until such time as the evidence shows otherwise, we need to focus on a Hilltops future and not. So I would say I would vote no to this motion. Thank you.
Question to Councillor Dodd. You mentioned that the evidence, what evidence would that be? Positive evidence, not a feeling, actual evidence.
So at the moment, I see that Hilltops is that we are taking constructive measures to manage our financial difficulties. I think those difficulties are happening right across the state. I don't think we are in a very different position to other councils. And so I don't see evidence of reasons to go back to something that we don't know what Young and Hardin and Boorowa, how they would have been, how those councils would have gone with COVID, with the weather we've had, with all the disasters we've had. We don't know how they would have gone. I can't see that they would have gone any differently to how we've gone. And I think we are moving forward. We have a plan. We have strong financial management, and I think we need to focus all our energies on Hilltops. If in 2 years' time that's not true, I'd come and look at it again. But I can't see any reason to be looking at agreeing to a poll now instead of keeping our energy focused on Hilltops.
So, in terms of the facts or the evidence, all the evidence is really just a gut feeling.
No, I don't see any evidence. Have you got evidence for?
I get people ringing me up. And asking me in the street why they didn't have the opportunity to say yes or no, and I have to say because the state government didn't want to give you that opportunity. But I don't know whether they're in the whether they're for or against, and I don't really know whether there's a groundswell of people out there for or against this motion. The purpose of it is to actually take a snapshot to gauge that, and I'm certainly not fearless of getting the answer back, because I don't think that it's really going to make any difference to council. We'll understand our community better, and we'll have given them a go. But if councillors are frightened of giving them a go, then I guess democracy will never be seen, will it?
Thank you.
Can I just say, Madam Mayor, that I'm not frightened by the outcome. I just think it's that we need to be focused on Hilltops until such time as anything changes.
Thank you, Councillor. And then I think Councillor Fitzgerald and then Councillor Hewson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to back up what Councillor Mackie said and to some extent what Councillor Dodd said. I just believe something like this could create dissension, could create division in the community, unnecessarily so. There's anecdotal evidence that people are still a little bit concerned about the amalgamation going on. And most of that, when you question the people, relates to their belief in the efficiency of Hardin and Boorowa's financial situation and Young's financial incompetence. And that's not true, as has been pointed out a number of times to us.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Look, we haven't moved into committee, so could we either have speakers for and against and then put it to vote, or could we move into committee? I'm happy for, if we need further discussion, to move into committee, but otherwise could we get to the vote?
Yeah. Yes, Councillor Flannery, I'm happy to move into committee. We have a
Councillor Flannery, you've moved to move into committee, and that's been No,
I haven't moved to move in committee. I'm just asking the question: can we adhere to the code of meeting practice?
In which case, I've moved that we move into committee. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Foreman. Righto. All those in favour?
Foreman, Mackie, Fitzgerald, Rolls, Hewson, Armstrong, Stadler, Piper, no. Dodd, 4. Those against. Ingram, Flannery and Piper, you are now in Committee of the Whole.
Okay, Committee of the Whole. I think we will go back to, we'll let Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, most of the anecdotal evidence of people concerned relates to incorrect understanding of the financial situation across the 3 shires prior to amalgamation and post-amalgamation. I believe that that maybe we haven't been able to explain that completely to our community in that way. So I don't want to create dissension, and there is some, and there have been some dilemmas in our service capability over the past few years due to, as Councillor Mackie said, the weather and the pandemic. But I believe that the restructure put in place by our General Manager and the Executive is starting, and again, this is anecdotal, is starting to show some benefits in terms of morale and so forth through the council and the council staff. I think we need to give that a time to settle in so people could start to think about that and say, wait a second, it may have taken 6 years, 7 years, but now the council is going. It's really starting to make effect. So I would like to see that. I've had a look at some of the other councils, like the Inner West Council, which is fighting hard to demerge, and that's Marrickville, Ashfield and Leichhardt. Thank you. And they had a referendum and they got 60% wanting to demerge out of 80% voting there. That's quite solid, but they're having to put a huge amount of money into people looking at, consultants to work out business plans and all that sort of stuff. I just think if we want to do a snapshot, a formal referendum at an election is probably not the best way to go. There are many ways to get a snapshot through modern technology, putting up a survey up there, make people know about it. What are your concerns? How do you feel about it? And let the community who have concerns respond that way, and then look at that. And if that directs us in a certain direction, to take that information. And that's what I think if we need a snapshot, we should do. I don't think we need a snapshot, though. I recommend that people vote no to this.
Councillor Foreman.
Through you, Madam Mayor, like I said last time this was raised, I feel that I haven't, just my general feeling, I don't ever get a phone call from anybody mentioning any dissatisfaction with the Amalgamated Council. I feel like we were all elected at the last elections to represent our community to the best of our ability. And I think, you know, the rumblings of a demerger just makes the community just lose a little bit of faith in our direction. You know, we've sort of got to focus on the positives. We are moving forward. We've got the restructure happening. It's in place. We're working it through our 355s. We've got our council policies. We're up to hiring staff. There's so many positives to moving forward that the undertone or the constant rumblings of a demerger, I don't think does us any favours. And that's a long-term prospect that we do vote if that came to pass, you know, yes or no in a poll. And it's always fantastic to hear from the public. As we know, that's what we're here for. We're here to listen and act. But I just don't feel that we're becoming a collective. And we as councillors, and I know the staff do the same, and the general manager, we all are starting to build really strong relationships right throughout our community. I mean, we've all put our hands up. We're all proactive. We're all out there going to openings and talking and listening. And we're really starting to really grow as a community of councillors that want to get out there and interact with all the constituents. So I feel that we have to stand up and say we are confident with our direction. We are starting to build relationships, and we're going to see this through 100%. We were voted in for the reason of being a progressive local government area, not one that's regressive.
Thank you, Councillor Foreman. Councillor Houston, and then Councillor Stadmiller. Would you like to make a comment after?
No, I'm going to vote no for this because I knock about a fair bit. I spend a significant amount of time in Young at local watering holes. I have a granddaughter that goes to school at Monteagle and spends some time at Wombat where I have family as well. And I have never, ever had anyone bring up this issue. It's extraordinary that people are making a big thing out of it. I think the council's working really well as can be expected at this early stage. And I just don't, there's no great groundswell of people out there wanting change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Houston. Councillor Stadmiller.
I'll just read out a circular that came out today, if I'm allowed my 5 minutes in Committee of the Whole. The Local Government Boundaries Commission has completed its examination of the business case submitted by the Cootamundra Gundagai Regional Council to demerge the LGA. Chairperson Bob said the Commission's report has today been submitted to the Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Wendy Tuckerman, for her consideration. Under the Local Government Act, the Minister is required to release this report within 48 hours. As an independent statutory authority set up under the Act, the Commissioner's role is to examine any proposal referred to it by the Minister, having regard to the factors set out in the Act, and to make a recommendation to the Minister. In carrying out its role, Mr. Sent said the Boundaries Commission endeavours to determine what will be the best for the communities affected by the proposal. Mr. Sent also noted that the submission of this report to the Minister, Commissioner Ferno Cook's term as a Commissioner comes to an end, having not stood for election in the 2021 local government elections. Mr. Sent wanted to acknowledge the valuable contribution Ms. Ferno Cook has made to the Commission's work since her appointment in February 2016. Mr. Sent also advised that he has decided to step down from the position of Chairperson of the Commission. He thanked his fellow Commissioners Rick Furman, OAM, Grant Gleeson and Leslie Ferno Cook, and the Commission's Executive Officer Alice Presley for their support, dedication and professionalism during this term. So that came out today. So the report from the Boundaries Commission, which has a member of a neighbouring council in Temora, Mayor Rick Furman, on it, will be released by former Hilltops Administrator Wendy Tuckerman, now Member for Goldman and Minister for Local Government, on Friday. But out of the 4 people on the Boundaries Commission, 2 have resigned today in the same media release, which I find pretty startling. We were asked at Harden whether we wanted to be part of a merger to begin with, and about 400 people turned up to the Harden Country Club to basically have a meeting under the government-appointed delegate, Amanda Chadwick. They were very vocal in their opposition. We were ignored and we were forced into this merger. Earlier on in the days, we spent a fortune on a computer system that failed to work, continued to fail to work, and continues to cost an absolute fortune. I'm not sure where it's up to. At no point have I ever voted 1 cent to go towards that computer system. This council has continued to operate under deficits, including a $16 million deficit in 2016 under the administrator. And it's of my opinion that I think Councillor Armstrong has slightly missed the mark here in that he's left the poll go a little bit longer than it should be done in conjunction with the March 25 state election, where the local government minister may not be in power anymore. There may be a hung parliament and we may have a new government, and the new government has decided to allow for merged councils to have binding plebiscites. And for some of us, we think it might be a good idea to have a big three-way merger and think it's wonderful for the region. And for others, and I can tell you now, I get told every week in Harden, what are you doing to get us out of this merger? And being one of only 2 councillors left representing Harden, the other being Councillor Flannery, it's on the radar. I'm not sure whether many people drive out to his farm to knock on his door, but they certainly come into my office in Neil Street and come to my house and tell me. So that's about my time up. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Piper, would you like to make any more comments? No? Yes.
Right. Give me the opportunity.
How about on Zoom, Councillor Ingram?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, councillors, for contributing to the conversation. One thing I'd say early on, it's probably not related to the point, but Deputy Mayor Foreman mentioned that she wasn't getting phone calls about it. I had a phone call 2 this week actually from people who said they couldn't contact you because your number wasn't available. They had to ring council to try and get through to you. I don't know how many other councillors are like that, but this was 2 phone calls this week just in regard to that. But that's probably why you don't get a lot of phone calls in regard to it. Back to Councillor Armstrong's notice of motion that he spoke and articulated pretty well is about giving our community the opportunity and the chance to have a say. Now I've heard debate around the chamber from different councillors saying, no, I don't hear about it. Then from other councillors, I hear about it all the time. And from this particular council, I hear it plenty of times. So we sort of not on the same page about who's hearing it and who's not hearing that they don't think the amalgamated council is working. So as Councillor Armstrong said, the one way to do that is give the people who elected us an opportunity to let us know. And now if that community comes back, if this was to happen, and say, no, we're happy, we're really happy where we are, I will be the first to put my hand up and say, well, I was listening to the wrong people. I only hope the people who sit there and say they're hearing people be happy are person enough to do the same. I heard a councillor speak about evidence. I heard Councillor Armstrong say he asked where that evidence was. I'm not too sure where that evidence is going to come from, but the evidence that it isn't working is quite clear, and you'd only have to go to one item in our business papers, and that's the financials. If anyone calls, Councillor Stadmiller pointed out a $16 million deficit the first year under administration. And council, we've spoke about it before, they just continue to happen. It'll be 10 million again next year. So if the people that are telling you that they're happy with the amalgamated council and they're fully aware of the financial issues we have and the levels of service that are dropping, that is their right. And I would never deny anyone their right. But I would like to give those people that have concerns and are concerned about the possibility of paying 60 to 70% more of their rates in a few years' time, their right to express their opinion. I think that's all Councillor Armstrong is asking for tonight, We're not talking about a building a business case, as my notice of motion was at the last council meeting. This is about giving the people who elected you an opportunity to have their say. I cannot for the life of me understand why any councillor would be unsure of themselves enough to ignore democracy and not give the community a chance to speak. So I endorse Councillor Armstrong's notice of motion for a poll, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Flannery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'll try to be brief. I think I have worked, as one of the councillors who sat on the first council and then sat on the predecessor council. I think I put a lot of effort in, and I think most of the other councillors did on the previous term, to work hard for the amalgamated council, and I think I still continue to work hard for better outcomes for the broader community. Is it working at the moment? We're heading down the path of lower service levels than we were. I sent a request for information regarding those service levels, which required information back from the General Manager as to what the budgets were on unsealed gravel roads and so on and so forth. And I was denied a report on those, which I thought was very disappointing under the code of conduct, especially when someone can be allowed to get up and speak when we had no evidence that they put in a formal request. And I'll be pursuing that matter, because I think it goes to the essence of what this is about. The only way I can determine whether the residents of Harden and the surrounds are getting better, worse, the same service levels is go back to the hard facts. And the hard facts were, how much were we spending on the services in and around, in the former Harden Shire and former Boorowa Shire and former Young Shire, and what are we spending now? Because it's just, I honestly have no idea where the money is being spent now relative to where it's being spent before, which doesn't have exactly a complete correlation to this question. But I think we need to get to the nub of what some of the problems are and where the money is being spent. I don't know what the solution is as far as demerger, continuing, going back to what was, continuing to exist as is now. I don't see any any harm in supporting this motion, but I do think if we are true to ourselves, we need to get some of the facts out. And going back to my initial point, I saw it as, I guess, disappointing to say the least, and perhaps some fear from the General Manager that he wasn't willing to provide those details to me, because I can't honestly say that I'm acting for the electors that elected me if I don't have that information, and I'll be one way or another seeking to get it. So perhaps the Mayor might, Madam Mayor might choose to direct the General Manager to provide that information in the same way that the Mayor seemed to direct the General Manager to allow someone to speak, or I'll use other means. But
I'm through you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Madam Mayor, in two parts. I'm not fearful of your question, Councillor Flannery. As I stated, that operational data from over 6 to 9 years ago is not required for your operational duties, in my opinion, and I did that under my appropriate delegation. Excuse me, Councillor Flannery, I'm addressing your allegations to me, so please give me the courtesy to respond. The second part is, as noted in the question and notice, the public speaker process, whether a speaker speaks or not, that is under my delegation, not the Mayor. She cannot instruct me to allow a person to speak or not, so that is on me. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Look, I think, we should get on with this vote, because we're spending a lot of our own time on something that can be just determined by putting our hands in the air. But I think we've got to come up with a better outcome one way or the other than the community's getting now.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. To conclude this, I'd just like to say a few words.
Madam Mayor, I don't believe that Councillor Pipe has been given the opportunity to say anything.
Councillor Councillor Piper.
I didn't realise I was going to, but
Yes, I did ask
I
Councillor
will-
Piper.
I will say just before we came to the meeting, I got a phone call, my first phone call, chastising myself and Councillor Mackie for not jumping in at the last meeting and backing this. But I pointed out to this particular person, I go along with Councillor Fitzgerald's talk earlier on, that I think in particular Boorowa, a lot of the people there believe they had a lot of money in their council account, which is an absolute fibby. And you cannot convince them that they didn't. And from that, they want to go back to the old ways. But knowing the financial situation, there's no way in the world Boorowa can survive.
Thank you. And just to finish off this discussion, and thank you everybody for your frank comments. In my role as Mayor, I see my job this time as bringing Hilltops together. And I spend a lot of my time going right round our beautiful Hilltops. When we talk about data, hard data, and anecdotal data, I presume I'm talking about anecdotal, but in no case. I have had people reflecting on the fact of amalgamation, but also then the acceptance that what has happened has happened. We can't go back to the past, and we need to direct our energies into the future. I'd also like to say that the concept of Hilltops, as far as I'm concerned, and I've been to many community meetings, including such as Pluribus, Rotary and everything, those sort of meetings. It's not that we don't lose our identity as individual areas, and I might say that I was actually lived in Hardinshire for a great proportion of my life. We don't lose our identities, but we always come together as the Hilltops, and we can gain such strength from working together as Hilltops, and that is just what I would like to say. So thank you everybody for the conversation tonight. Can I have someone to move us out? Thank you. And second, Houston. Thank you. All those in favour?
Out of committee of the whole.
To move out of committee of the whole. Thank you, General Manager. And we go back to that notion of motion. 2219, poll of electors regarding a demerger. I will put it to the floor.
Could I like to speak against it?
Oh, yes.
Now for? Madam Mayor?
Yes, we've had one for.
I'll speak for. Sorry, I did say against. I'd like to speak for the motion of having a poll of electors regarding a demerger, so that we can show faith to our community that put us here in the first place, and that we will listen to them. I don't know, and I'm struggling to understand the concept of why anyone isn't prepared to let the public have a say. It takes all doubt out of anyone's mind, and as I said, I'd be happy to put my hand up and say I was wrong. But the only way to find out about that is to give our community the opportunity to have a say. I'm hearing councillors say, no, it's going fine, it's going fine. Ask the community then. You have nothing to fear. Let the community have their say. They were never giving the opportunity to have a say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Ingram.
Yeah, we better get that right.
I know. My apologies. I hope I'm getting better. Beg your pardon?
You're not.
Yes, I'm not. Well, my apologies once again. All right. If I put this motion, those in favour?
Those in favour Ingram, Flannery, Armstrong, Stadmiller.
Those against?
Foreman, Fitzgerald, Mackey, Dodd, Hewson, Piper, Dodd, Rolls, Dodd, and Hewson. Sorry.
And
I'm having a barrack. And Rolls, I said it twice.
Okay, thank you.
You're affecting me, Madam Mayor.
All right, the motion is lost. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'm going to have to excuse myself. I'm sorry.
Just for everyone, since Councillor Stadmiller has excused himself, as has Councillor Flannery. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to 14.2, 22.20, and this is motion headspace for Hilltops. I am the mover of this, and it is that Council endorse Hilltops Youth Action Group petition, Headspace for Hilltops, write a letter of support to the appropriate ministers for establishment of a Hilltops Headspace Hub, and engage with the community to support a submission to the federal government for funding to establish a Headspace Hub in the Hilltops local government area.
Question to the Mayor.
Yes.
In the early days of establishment of the new shared library facility at Young, there was dedication space for a headspace, and there was great discussion about a headspace. I'm just wondering how this fits into that, or is this totally independent of the headspace that was originally proposed in the development at the high school?
Councillor Armstrong, as far as I'm aware, that conversation didn't go very far. I have found it quite difficult, in a sense, trying to work out how we work towards having a headspace in Hilltops. I understand about 10 years ago there was a movement for headspace. Is it headspace you're talking about, or the country universities?
The term used at the many meetings that I attended with the community members was headspace.
Headspace. Well, if that is the case, then it would be really good that there is actually a space for headspace, but we still have to get the grant for it, and that is the hard part. It's a federal grant. It's given by the federal politicians. At the moment, we are actually, after much what can I say, discussion, many phone calls, we're now on the listing of communities that would like a headspace, and then it is up to us to petition and lobby as much as we can the federal members, our own federal member, but also the Minister for Mental Health, and I have been in touch with the Murrumbidgee Primary Health Care Network, who are willing to back us, and many of the private organisations and schools within our community. But it is really a case, I said at one stage, I said, how do you get on the list to have a headspace? And the answer was, well, you were a marginal seat, which we weren't, and the other one was that you make as much noise as possible.
I just find that a little bit incredible that the state government are already at the heady levels of negotiations undertaken for the highly contentious library facility at the Young High School, that the people that would be undertaking those negotiations would not have some ability to commit, or at least be aware of something as crucially important as a headspace.
They could most probably certainly support us, but it is still federally funded, and it is up to the feds to decide. I have been reliably informed that from October the planning starts for the next budget, but we're not looking at we will get HEADSPACE funded maybe in the next budget, but the budget after. But as far as I have been able to find out, it is a case of lobbying, and it is up to the federal government to make that final decision. It's not a state decision. Once the funding is given, and at the moment, Hilltops is about the only one. COURRY has a hub, YAS has a hub, Cootamundra has an outreach from Wagga that our children can access, but that's only half a day a month. And we're reaching a stage, whereas Hilltops, we're in the position, I think, because of our cohesion, to really put forward a strong case to have a Hilltops hub. It takes about 12 months once it's been approved, and where the space will be, I was told that it has been leased areas. Whether that would be in the library or not would be interesting. I don't know about that, so I can't answer that. But I can certainly see if I can find out for you.
Can we find out? I mean, that
certainly can.
Here's a $6 or $7 million facility that we were promised was going to have all sorts of things in it. Certainly, if it doesn't incorporate the headspace, then there certainly was significant discussion of it in the early days.
It would be ideal if it incorporates space for headspace, but it's still a matter of getting headspace. Yes.
Yeah, I've spent a significant amount of my professional career involved in mental health for youth. Professionally, also I have a quite significant personal contact with youth mental health, that I would absolutely, totally support this motion, that it should go through unanimously. And just taking that last point of using the library as a place for a headspace, that needs to be really thought through. Youth mental health often need specifically dedicated spaces away from the public, and although the library may turn out to be a fantastic facility, it may not serve the purposes as a mental health facility. But I ask everybody to support this motion.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Ingram.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Councillor Fitzgerald. I concur. I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't fully endorse and support the motion and the cause behind it. My memory fails me sometimes, but I recall Bronnie Taylor coming to Young, and I thought there was a headspace allocated to the school a few years ago. It may have been only a temporary thing, but there was definitely Bronnie Taylor, an announcement with headspace at the high school, I thought, at the time. And once again, my memory is I can have to chase that up, but if no one else has heard anything about that, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that something happened in that area with headspace a while back.
Councillor Ingham, you're quite correct. There was a temporary space. I wasn't there at the time, so I cannot give you any details for why it was there, how long it was there, or whatever, but it was there temporarily.
My reason for bringing that up is maybe, you need to contact Bronnie Taylor, Madam Mayor, or Mr General Manager, and just find out what happened then.
We certainly intend to. There is a small committee working on this, and we certainly will try to follow any avenue that we possibly can. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My recollection was that we were not able to get headspace. I was involved in the high school PNC, but we did get a wellbeing hub, but that we didn't get headspace because we were too close to Cootamundra or somewhere, which was getting outreach from Wagga. But we needed one, and there was a lot of support for that, but we didn't get headspace.
And I have a feeling, Councillor Armstrong, that it might be a being space that was talked about in the library?
Categorically,
it was
head space.
Okay.
Because a lot of the people on the committee at the time, the steering committee at that time, had no idea what the head space facility or service was.
Yeah.
So there was some discussion afterwards, after one of the meetings, to try and sort of bring people up to speed with what the headspace service provided.
Okay. I'd just like to say that the Youth Action Group are really coming on board with this, and to see the children themselves actively working to promote and to promote the provision of headspace in Hilltops is wonderful to see. So I congratulate them too, and I'm looking forward to working with them closely to see what advances we can make. Thank you.
Want to put the motion?
All right. Okay, I will put the motion.
Well,
you'll move it? I think we moved it.
Madam Mayor moved it and it was seconded by Tony Houston.
Yeah. So no more discussion if there isn't. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you, councillors.
7.3. Pigeons.
Okay.
Councillor Ingram.
Councillor Ingram, I think 14.3, 22, 21, concern with pigeons at the town hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's disappointing that I've had to put this into an official notice of motion. I've been talking about this problem, and they were talking about it a long time before I was elected in 2012 on the former Young Council, and it always seems to manage to fall into the too hard basket. There's a number of reasons why we can't do this, we can't do that, without going into it and causing more uproar. I think the days of being told we can't do anything are over. Our principal building in Young, our town hall, is a disgrace. And I've spoke to the general manager in regard to this, and he's been kind enough to let me inform me about the response, and I'm quite happy for a report to come back to the next council meeting. As long as there's the report at the end indicates some actions and not investigations, because we've been investigating it for 10 years now that I know of, and it was before my time. So I would hope that my fellow councillors would support my notice of motion to let's try and eradicate the pigeon problem on the town hall. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I'll second this motion, and with a little bit of history, I was involved at the high school with the lovely building there that used to be the old courthouse, which was covered in pigeons when I arrived there in my role. And we worked at it for a few years and finally were able to put up the prongs on all the ledges and dissuaded the pigeons. I suspect they might have moved down here. But I think that getting the people in to do the prongs, I don't think it was a hugely expensive, although the bill did go to the regional office, so I can't tell you exactly how much it cost. But I support this motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Pigeons beware. We move into confidential. Can I have someone move this? Thank you,
move that way.
Dodd. Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Yes, did we put it to vote?
No, we didn't.
We'll put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. After through confidential report 15.2 20/23 award of contract RF 607 of 2022 supply delivery of quarry material Council resolved that it receive and note the report on RFT 607 of 2022 supply and delivery of quarry materials. B, it award the contract number 607 of 2022 to the successful organisations. And C, delegate authority to the General Manager to execute all necessary documentation associated with this contract and expend funds as required within current budgets. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. And thank you, councillors, for conducting this meeting respectfully and civilly. And I now will move to close the meeting at 7:41. So thank you, everybody, for your attendance.